Right, welcome back to Sanhedrin. Last week we didn't do very much Gemarah because we talked a lot about adoption.
Yes.
It was very interesting. But we're now back in the Gemarah. We did do a little bit of Gemarah. We talked about Palti. Okay, before I put the screen on, who can remind us all who was Palti?
Palti was Michal's.
Palti was Michal's husband.
Okay.
At least he possibly was. He was purportedly at one point her husband, although the marriage was not consummated.
Okay, that was. I was going to jump in there and say that wasn't when you said she was Michal's husband. That wasn't. That was very un-Julia-like because it wasn't. It wasn't definitive. But then you corrected it beautifully. Yes, Palti was sort of married to Michal. According to Shaul, who was Michal's father, she was married to Palti. According to David, she was married to him and not Palti. So poor old Palti didn't know whether he was coming or going. So he was a big tzaddik, and we spoke about this last time. Let's put the Gemarah on the screen now. On page 113 in the Steinsaltz, page 19b, right at the bottom, if you're in the Vilna Shas, you should be able to see it now. We asked the question why he was called Palti in one place and Paltiel in another place. And what we said last week was, Sheplato el min aveira. Hashem saved him from doing an aveira. Ma'esa, what did he do? Na'atz cherev beino leveina. He stuck a sword in the marital bed between himself and Michal, and he said, Kol ha'osek b'davar zeh yidaker b'cherev zeh. Anybody that gets involved in monkey business should be stabbed with this sword. So that's a fairly strong discouragement for getting involved if you're going to be stabbed with a sword. And of course, he did not involve himself in sexual relations with Michal. That's where we left off last week. Now, this week, the Gemarah is going to challenge that and says, whoa, hang on a minute. V'hachativ, is it not written, Vayelech ita isha? Now, before we actually look at what the context is, let's learn a bit of Hebrew grammar. Okay, Vayelech, what does that mean?
He went.
And he went, correct. Ita.
With her.
With her. How do you know it's with her?
I don't know, because I've just learned it.
It's not exactly with her. There's two forms. One is ita, and the other is ima. And if it's ima, if it's ita, it's two people. He's going with her in the same direction, but he's not necessarily together with her. And if it's with her, like she's together with him, then it's ima with a mem.
Okay, that's interesting. It wasn't what I was referring to, but it's interesting. I'm referring to ita. Can you see there is a dot in the hay?
Yeah.
Okay. David Marks, tell us how you would pronounce that word correctly, please.
Ita.
Ita. And you have to pronounce the hay. Okay, it's quite a hard thing to do because a hay is not normally a pronounceable letter at the end of a word. But that is called a hay.
We're losing you, Johnny, the speech.
Okay, perhaps I need your phone. Why don't you bring the next few weeks without your phone? Can you? No, good. No, okay.
No.
That's why this is happening. It's a real nuisance. Let me know when you can hear me now. It should come back very shortly, hopefully.
Yes, it's back.
So it's called a mappic hay. A hay
Yep.
with a dot in it is called a mappic hay, and you have to pronounce that hay. Now, with the word ita, it can't really mean anything else other than with her. The correct pronunciation is ita. I'm pronouncing the hay. Now, the next word is very important that you pronounce the mappic hay. You can see the mappic hay in the next word, isha. Okay. Now, what does that word isha mean with a mappic hay?
It's interesting. Isha's normally a wife.
Okay. All right. Very good, Leslie. If it didn't have a mappic hay, if it didn't have a dot in that hay, it would say isha. What is an isha?
A wife.
A wife
A woman.
or a woman. Correct. If you put a mappic hay in it, it means something completely different. If you put a dot in that hay, it's not isha, it's isha with a mappic hay. Now, take off the hay altogether, and what do you get?
Ish, a man. Ish,
And what is an ish?
a man.
A man.
Man, or it can also mean a husband for the same
Yep.
obvious reasons.
Very
Now, the
well, yeah.
mappic hay turns it into her husband. Okay, so you know that often feminine words have a hey at the end of it, right? You know that often, yeah? So isha is a woman, but isha with a mappic hay, a hay with a dot in it at the end of a word, makes it into a, I can't remember the correct English expression for it, but it means that it belongs to her. Come on, Julia, help me.
Possessive.
Possessive, that's the word, possessive. It turns it into a possessive form. So this is not isha without a dot in the hay, because that would mean wife or woman, and it wouldn't make any sense. But isha with a mappic hay means an ish, a man, which is belonging to her. It's a possessive form. What would his we don't have such a thing in Jewish law, but they do in English law. What would his husband be?
Sure. Isho. Isho.
Isho. Isho. Yes, with a vav at the end. Isho would be his husband. His wife would be ishto, right? But her husband is isha with a mappic hay. So that little dot there, which most Ashkenazim ignore completely, is very, very important. Sometimes, for example, when you're laning, it can completely change the meaning. And if you don't pronounce that mappic hay, it's really problematic. Imagine this was in the laning. This is actually from Shmuel. So it's not actually in laning, but imagine it was in laning, and it was the laning which was dioraita, and you said vayelich ita isha without the mappic hay, and you didn't say isha. You've completely changed the meanings. It would mean, and he went with and a woman. It doesn't make any sense. It can't be that, because vayelech is a masculine form. He went with her. Who went with her? Isha. Doesn't make any sense. It would, if I didn't have a dot, it wouldn't make sense. It's got to be her husband. Okay.
How did they know they had dots in those days, Johnny?
In the same way as you know that when you see a word cough in English, it's not pronounced coug, right? You just know it, right? That's how you learn it. They just knew it because it didn't make sense. If you were to say, I've got a coug, nobody would know what you're talking about, right? And if you were to say Vayelech ita isha, it wouldn't make any sense from in the context of the in the context of the pasuk. Let's have a look at the pasuk that we're talking about now. Now that we've learned.
Wait a second. Can Isha, the way you said it with a dot, can it mean her man?
Yeah, it means her man or her husband.
What I'm getting at is as opposed to her husband.
Yeah, it can mean her man.
Because if you take what I said about the itach and imach, yeah, then they're two people. They're two people. How do I say this? If all of us get on a bus, if I get on a bus to Tel Aviv, yeah, and the rabbi is also on the bus, but he's sitting at the front and I'm sitting at the back, or vice versa, then we're all on the bus going to Tel Aviv. That's with a tough.
Right.
If the rabbi and I are going to the rabbinate in Tel Aviv to organize something, then I'm going imcha with a mem. The two of us are traveling together to the same place and we're one unit. And that's the difference between the mem and the tough. And here it's using a tough. So the two of them are going in the same direction with each other, but they're not connected.
Okay, that fits in absolutely perfectly, Hannah, with the context of this pasuk. So let's have a look at the context of the pasuk. Can you see my screen with the pasuk on?
Yes.
Okay, right. This is in Shmuel Bet, chapter 3. We're going to come to it in a few weeks in our Tanakh Shiur. Jeffrey, if you would read for us from verse 14, please. I've highlighted 16 because that's our verse, but I'd like you to read from 14, please.
And David sent messengers to Ishbosheth, the son of Saul, saying, Give my wife Michal, whom I espoused to myself with 100 foreskins of Philistines. And Ishbosheth sent and took her from a man from Paltiel, the son of Laish. And her husband went with her, walking and weeping after her up to Bahurim. And Abner said to him, Go return. And he returned.
Okay, so here, this fits in what Hannah is saying fits in very well indeed, because what Jeffrey has just read is the story that David wanted his wife back. So he sent a messenger to Ishbosheth and he said, Give me my wife Michal. And he says, I'm married to this Michal because I did the deal with the 100 foreskins. We spoke about this in our Gemarah Shir a few weeks ago. And so Ishbosheth took her Me'im Ish. Okay? Me'im Ish. From a man. Which man? From Paltiel. Why does it need to say Me'im Ish? Why doesn't it just say Ishbosheth sent and took her from Paltiel, the son of Laish? Because an Ish also means a husband. So the pasuk is telling us here that Ishbosheth took her from this Paltiel, who was an Ish, at least according to some people, he was an Ish. He was a husband. Okay? And then we've got our pasuk, Vayelech ita isha, and her husband went with her. Now, if we take Hannah's point, and if they were really a husband and wife in all senses of the word, then they would be very much together, and therefore it would be ima and not ita, according to Hannah's theory. But it isn't. It's ita, which is a less connected situation. So that actually, Hannah, works out very, very nicely indeed in the context of what we have learned. So the Gemarah is saying, well, hang on a minute. Let's go back to the Gemarah now. The Gemarah says, hang on a minute. You've just told me that Palti did not have any relations with Michal and stuck this sword in the bed. Why does the pasuk call him Isha, her husband? A husband is not somebody who doesn't have relations with his wife, right? And so the Gemara says, well, yeah, you're right, really. But Shana asa la ka isha. It means he na'asa, he became, he was made to her ka, like isha, like her husband. What does that mean? Like her husband.
A wife. It means he had emotional feelings towards her. He looked up. We don't have a time frame for how long they were together, but
significant.
They were.
Significant period of time. How do we know? For exactly the reasons you've just said. Because he became very close to her, became very affectionate and cherished her and looked after her. And he was a husband to her in all manner, apart from the physical manner. And it was only that he was a big tzaddik, and he was doubtful as to whether she was allowed to him as a wife, in the physical sense, that he refrained. And so in all other matters, he was a husband to her and she was a wife to him. Obviously, the physical relationship between a husband and a wife is a part of their relationship and is an important part, but it's not the only part, of course. And he was like a husband to her in every other matter. And how do we know that? How do we know that? Well, let's go back to the pasuk. Let's go back to the pasuk. It says in the pasuk, Jeffrey, verse 16, please.
And her husband went with her, walking and weeping after her up to Bahurim. And Abner said to him, go return. And he returned.
So we know that he was walking after her and crying. Why was he crying?
Because he was going to lose her.
He didn't want to lose her. He didn't want to lose her. So that's a very important issue there to show us that he was very affectionate towards her. He cherished her. He considered her to be his wife in all other aspects other than the physical aspect. And that was only because he wasn't sure about this whole thing and he didn't want to do an Aveira. And we'll see very shortly in the Gemara that he is given incredible praise for what he did. You'll be amazed at how the Gemara describes Paltiel very shortly. So let's go back to the Gemara again.
Michal must get some praise as well.
Michal also, yes, Michal also should get some praise. That is true. Right, so V'haktiv, does it not say haloch uvacho? He was weeping as he went. So the Gemara says, Rav Steinsaltz adds in for us, if from the outset he thought that she was David's wife, why was he crying? Why was he crying?
Because when there's somebody that you get close to and they're going away and you don't know if you're ever going to see them again, you get upset.
Correct. But that's not what the Gemara says. That's not what the Gemara says. I agree with you. What the Gemara is hinting at here is that really Paltiel was shouldn't have even got close to her in non-physical ways, because if he thought that she was David's wife, he shouldn't have allowed himself to become emotionally attached to her. And that wasn't why he was crying, according to the Gemara. Let's have a look at what the Gemara says. The Gemara says he was crying al ha-mitzvah da'azel minei, about the mitzvah that had gone away. Azel means to go, which had gone away from him. He lost the opportunity for a mitzvah. What mitzvah are we talking about?
The procreation.
Well, no, in fact not, because he
Not
wasn't
sleeping with them.
Not sleeping with her.
Yeah, he'd lost the mitzvah of not procreating with her. Which is this. I was going to ask you a question, which is a tongue-in-cheek question. I was going to ask you, where do you think Palti came from? And I was. It was a tongue-in-cheek question. I was going to say he must have come from Manchester, because in Manchester they love having an opportunity not to do an Avera, right? They love it. The more not Averas you can do, they love it. And here he's crying because he's lost the opportunity to stop himself doing an Avera, which is a completely upside down thinking process in my mind.
But we say in the morning, he's misguided, because we say in the morning in Birkot HaShachar, yeah, las mitzvah, no, things that you get, that you reap the benefit from in this world, but the payment is in the next world. And I think the second to last one of them is la hasot shalom bein ish leishto. And what he's doing is he's taking her back to her husband. So he's actually doing something he's going to get rewarded for.
Okay, that's a nice point. He's not actually taking her to husband. She's sending her reluctantly. Avner has said, take her. You don't mess around with Avner. Those of you who are learning Tanakh will know that Avner was not to be messed with.
Yeah.
So he didn't really have a choice. But yes, the point that you make is true. It's an upside down thinking to me. To be happy, to be sad that you've no longer got to prevent yourself from doing an Avera. If I had a difficulty with stopping myself doing an Avera, and somebody removed that from me, I'd be happy. I won't be sad. So right, I don't have to worry about that Avera anymore. No, he wanted to worry about it. It's a very Mancunian way of thinking. It's upside.
Could the Gemarah be misguided?
I think. Well, I don't think we can say it's misguided. I think to me, it's a bit, it's a bit upside down thinking. But there you go. That's what the Gemarah says. The Gemarah says that he was crying because he's now missed out on the reward that he would get for restraining himself in that situation. And he brings a proof, which I think is a bit of a shvacha proof, but still, let's go back to the pasuk. Read it again for us, Jeff. 16.
And her husband went with her, walking and weeping, after her up to Bahurim. And Abner said to him, Go, return. And he returned.
So where did they walk to?
To where Avner was with Ishbosheth, where David had come to claim his wife.
Look at the verse. Where did
A
they
place
walk?
called Bahurim.
A place called Bahurim. What does Bahurim mean?
Young men.
Young men, bachas.
Bochers. Yeah, bochers. Bahurim, young men. Young men. Now, the Gemara uses this word Bahurim, this name of this place, in a rather unusual way. Let's have a look. Go back to the Gemara. Sorry that we're flipping back and forth, but at least we've got the opportunity to do it with a screen. Ad Bahurim, says the Gemara. What does it mean, to Bahurim? He says, no. The Gemara says, this is not a place. Shena'asu shnehem ke vachurim. Both of them made themselves as if they were Bahurim. A Bachur is
Breaking up again, Johnny.
Sorry, let me hear me. The sound, no good. Okay, let's say so. Let me know when it's back. No good. Improving. Michael's thumb is not moving. No good. Oh, this is a long one.
Can you hear us okay?
You're fine, yeah. You're very
You're
good.
All right now.
You're okay.
So they say they were made into like Bachurim. What is a Bachur? A young man, and specifically an unmarried man. and an unmarried man, shelo ta'amu ta'am bi'ah, who have not tasted the taste of intercourse.
Who is they?
Palti and Michal.
Both her as well. Okay.
Yeah. So Shena'asu Shnehem, both of them made themselves as if they were Bachurim, as if they were unmarried men. And these unmarried men have never tasted the taste of intercourse.
That's like annulling a marriage as opposed to divorce. You annul it, you go back to before the marriage, not you take a marriage and break it up.
Correct. Well, the marriage was never consummated, was it?
No. So what the Gemara is saying is that the marriage is being annulled, and it never happened.
Yeah. If it was a marriage in the first place, which we don't know whether it was or it wasn't, if it was never consummated and therefore wasn't a marriage in the first place, and they were like Bachurim. Now, according to the actual pshat of the pasuk, Bachurim is a place. Ad Bachurim. The Gemara is homiletically expounding this word Bachurim. The simple pshat, the simple explanation is that it's a place, and they went up to this place called Bachurim. But the Gemara says that we can learn from that word that they made themselves like Bachurim. And that is the end of that little bit of Gemara. Let's just summarize it. Palti says, why is he called Palti Ale? He's called Palti Ale because God was added to his name because God helped him prevent himself from doing this Aveira, and he stuck a sword in the bed. And we questioned that and said, well, why is he described as her husband? And we said it's because he was like her husband in all other aspects apart from the physical, and he cried about losing her. And we can prove, says the Gemara, that they did not indulge in intercourse by the homiletic expounding of the word Bachurim, that they were like Bachurim. So right at this point now, we have a praise of Palti, that he was a big tzaddik. He prevented himself from being tempted with Michal, and not only that, he was crying about losing the opportunity not to do the Aveira. Yes, David.
Yeah, have a look at the Art Scroll note 45, taking you back to Manchester.
Yes, okay, let's read that out. Thank you for pointing that out. The Gemara in Makos 23b, Makos means hitting or smiting.
Smiting.
That's the connection to Manchester, is it, David? You feel
No.
I'm being facetious. Right, the Gemara in Makos states that someone who is confronted with an opportunity to sin but refrains from doing so receives the same reward as if he had actively performed a mitzvah. Palti was saddened over losing the opportunity to exercise such willpower. Exactly as we said before, it's upside down thinking. Instead of being negative, go out and do some mitzvahs instead of preventing yourself from doing some aveiras.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Usually I don't go along with shracha things or whitewashers, but in this particular case, I'm just wondering whether the Rishonim thought, I don't know, I can only say it in Yiddish, es passt nicht, yeah, lo matim, that he should have had feelings towards her because he wasn't her husband and everything. And so they've made their explanations the way they've made them to maybe ignore the fact that when you live together with somebody in a close relationship, even if it's not physical, you can become very, very good friends, and you can be upset, and it's okay. So you're saying goodbye, and that's that. And they're also saying, yeah, it takes taking mentally or emotionally taking the situation back to before they were connected and they were bachurim. It sort of seems like the Gemarah doesn't want to acknowledge that you can have the word is hang on
Platonic.
very strong platonic feelings to somebody.
Yeah, I don't think that's what the Gemarah is saying, Hannah, and I'll tell you why. Because the next piece of Gemarah is so highly praising of Paltiel. It's certainly not critical of him at all. It's highly praising of him. Let's do it straight away. Let's go into it. Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says, Tokfo shel Yosef anvertanuto shel Boaz. Okay, Tokef. What is Tokef? What is Tokef in modern Hebrew? You must have been asked for the Tokef in modern Hebrew.
Validity.
This is
validity, expire.
Can you see that? Where's the Tokef on there?
Credit card.
Yeah, credit card has an expiry date.
Ah.
The Tokef is the expiry date. Okay. Now, what in fact is the expiry date? What does it tell you, that expiry date?
It's no longer valid.
Okay, and when it is valid, what does it have? What can you do with a credit card?
You have credit.
It's valid. You can use it.
You have power. It gives you power to spend. Okay? So the Tokef is the period of time that your credit card has validity or has power. Okay? Has the ability to be used. Okay? Once it's out of Tokef, it has no power. Right? It has no purchasing power, if you like. Have a look at Rav Steinsaltz's translation of the word Tokfo. Tokfo shel Yosef, Joseph's power. It's a beautiful use of the Hebrew language to use Tokef for the validity date, because it's the power that it gives you, that it has power. So he says Joseph's power, and this is a very interesting word, anvetanuto, is the humility of Boaz. And we'll look at that in a minute, what it means. Where do you have that word, anvetanuto? Where do you not say this every Motzei Shabbat?
No.
In Havdalah.
Huh? Where do you not say that word every Motzei Shabbat?
Havdalah.
No, because if it was in Havdalah, you would say it. My question is, where do you not say it? Where is it in something that you should say Motzei Shabbat that we don't?
V'yiten lecha.
Very good. V'yiten lecha. It is in V'yiten lecha.
We said it in Manchester.
Yeah. Many places.
Manchester.
Correct. We do. Absolutely. No, don't never miss an opportunity.
So it's a mitzvah for not saying it, is it?
So V'yiten lecha, which is a long thing that you say after V'hi Noam. We, generally speaking, don't say it, but within there, if you get your siddur out, it's towards about 2/3 of the way down. It talks about Anvetanuto shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the humility of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Look it up. I haven't got a siddur in front of me to show you exactly where it is, but it's in V'yiten lecha. How do I know it's in V'yiten lecha? Because I actually do say V'yiten lecha. I say it at home when I get home after Havdalah. And it's a word that I always struggled with saying. You know, did that ever happen to you, where there's certain words that you just can't get out? And anvatanuto was one of those. I've sort of got it now, but it was always a word that bothered me. Anvatanuto, it means humility. So what is this Gemarah talking about? The power of Joseph is the humility of Boaz. Tokpo shel Boaz, the power of Boaz, anvatanuto shel Palti ben Laish, is the humility of Palti, the son of Laish. What is going on here in this Gemarah? What has Yosef and Boaz and Palti got in common? I'm going to take this off the Gemarah, off the screen, so you can't cheat. What have Boaz, Yosef, and Palti got in common that they are compared to one another? And what is this Gemarah talking about? So first of all, what do they have in common? Go on, Julia.
I don't know about Boaz, but as far as Joseph, he didn't succumb to to Potiphar's wife.
Joseph did not succumb to Potiphar's wife. And Palti?
Or Palti, the same with Michal.
And Palti did not succumb to Michal. Okay, so have a guess about Boaz then, Julia. Who was Boaz?
Well, isn't it something to do with the story?
Great-grandfather.
He was Ruth's Goel. He did a boom with Ruth,
Okay.
and when she came to him in where he was sleeping, he didn't do anything with her, and he explained to her that there's somebody who's closer than him, and they'll check it out, and if he doesn't want to do Ibum, then Boaz will do Ibum.
Correct. So he initially resisted the temptation with Ruth. So you're quite right, Julia. That is the connection between Yosef, Boaz, and Palti. Now, what do they mean Gemarah mean when it says the power of Joseph is the humility of Boaz, and the humility of Boaz, the power of Boaz is the humility of Palti? What are they talking about? Okay. Anybody, any idea what we're talking about here? All right.
It takes a certain amount of humility to accept that somebody is forbidden to you, because there's no, without anybody else involved. You have to be prepared to accept somebody else's judgment that this person is forbidden to you.
All right.
And you humble yourself, because if you're arrogant, then you can take anything you want, when you want, and how you want.
Okay, so that's true. All of that is true, but it's not what the Gemarah means. And I'll show you what the Gemarah means. Let's have a look at all three stories, and then you will understand what the Gemarah means. Let's go to the stories. So, what was the first one? Yosef. Okay, it happens to be in which Sedra? Have a guess.
This week's.
This week's Sedra.
Yes,
Correct.
yes.
It's in this week's Sedra. Jeffrey. Oh, Jeffrey's dropped off. Okay, he's nodded off. We'll do it here for him. Okay, there it is on the screen for you. Now it came to pass after these events that his master's wife lifted up her eyes to Joseph, and she said, "Lie with me, shichva'i me." She tried to seduce him, but he refused. And he said to his master's wife, "Behold, with me my master knows nothing about anything in the house, and all he has given into my hand. In this house there is no one greater than I, and he has not withheld anything from me, except you, insofar as you are his wife. Now how can I commit this great evil and sin against God?" And now it came about when she spoke to Joseph day in and day out that he did not obey her to lie beside her and to be with her. And it came about on a certain day that he came to the house to do his work, and none of the people of the house were in the house. And so she grabbed him by his garment, saying, "Lie with me." But he left his garment in her hand, and he fled, and he went outside. That is the story that we will read in this week's Parsha. Something occurred to me in verse 11, that when did this situation arise to its peak, if you like, when there was nobody in the house, okay, when they were on their own, which is, of course, the source of the very sensible halacha of
Yichud.
yichud, okay, yichud. Avril Links, why are you grinning about yichud?
It's not my thing, Yichud.
Okay, tell me why it's not your thing.
Because of the absurdity of it's like with a boy, isn't it? A boy over 13 can't be with his grandmother. And
Okay, right. Yeah, you're right. You're right. It can be, yichud can be interpreted. We're going back to the Chumrah capital of the world again. It can be interpreted in all sorts of ways. But the concept of yichud, which is that a man and a woman should not be secluded in a place together, is an utterly sensible and appropriate cautionary halacha. How many times has it occurred in history where a man and a woman who should not be together find themselves with an opportunity on their own and they succumb? Over and over and over again, this occurs in history, and yichud is a very sensible halacha, right? If you take it to extremes, like we discussed it last week in the Gemarah shir, didn't we, about an adopted child, right?
Yeah.
If you take that to extremes, in there, then it can make Avril smile and say it's not her thing. That's what she meant. She didn't mean that it's not a sensible halacha. It's not a sensible halacha if you interpret it in a very extreme way. But the halacha of yichud is an incredibly sensible halacha. I remember my father, Zichronu Livracha, when he used to work for the Benevolent Society, they used to have to go and visit people in their homes to see whether what help they needed if they lived in. And I particularly remember there was these high-rise blocks in Hume that they moved. Jeffrey will remember this. They moved all the people out of Cheetham Hill, which was a Jewish area, and they moved them to these high-rise blocks in Hume, which was a Goyish area. And these poor, and I say poor in monetary terms and also poor people, were stuck out there in the middle of nowhere amongst a whole bunch of goyim. And the Benevolent Society used to go and see what they needed. Did they need a washing machine? Did they need help with something? Did they cook or whatever it was? My father would never ever go on his own, because he used to say they can read you a bilbil, right? They can make up a whole story. Who knows what might go on, right? And that was the law of yichud. He didn't know it was a law of yichud. What did he know? He didn't know what the halachas of yichud, but it was a very sensible halacha. The number of times that I've done cases in my medical legal work, when I'm doing cases for the GMC, where there's been fitness to practice trials for hearings for doctors who've been accused of doing all sorts of things, which they may or may not have done. But if they didn't do them, they put themselves in a position to be accused of doing them by being secluded alone with a member of the opposite gender. So this is the source here of.
Did go with another woman, with a woman or with a man, just out of interest?
Say that again, Johnny.
Did your dad take a man with him or a woman with him?
He preferably took a woman, but if he didn't have a woman, he would at least take another man. He would never be there alone. My mum used to go with him.
So the woman couldn't be alone with two men by then, is that right?
But it's less of an issue because you got chaperone.
Calm down.
We can't hear you.
I can't hear you again. Okay, this is.
Can't hear you, Johnny.
Okay, I'll wait until you can hear me. Let me know when you can hear me. Michael, I hope your arm doesn't get too tired. Can you hear me yet?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Good.
He used to take somebody with him as a chaperone. If my mum could go with him, my mum used to go as a chaperone, but he never ever went alone. So this pasuk here, verse 11, is a very good example. It's the source of the halachas of yichud, because when was it that Potiphera, the wife of Potiphar, tried to seduce him to the highest degree and grabbed his clothing? When there was nobody in the house, when they were there on their own. Don't put yourself at that risk. certainly today there's a case that's just finished in the courts of a doctor who was accused of misdemeanors, and the part of the problem was that he examined women without a chaperone, and that was part of the issue. So ein chadash tachat hashemesh, there's nothing new under the sun. That is the source of that halacha. So that's the story of Joseph. Joseph did not succumb to the seduction of Potiphera. Okay, now who was next after Joseph? Boaz. Boaz. Let's have a look at the story of Boaz. Jeffrey, read Boaz for us. It starts at verse 2.
And now, is not Boaz our kinsman, with whose maidens you were? Behold, he is winnowing the threshing floor of the barley tonight. Sorry. And you shall bathe and anoint yourself and put on your clothes and go down to the threshing floor. Do not make yourself known to the man until he has finished eating and drinking. And it shall be when he lies down that you shall know where he will lie. And you shall come and uncover his feet and lie down, and he will tell you what you shall do. And she said to her, all that you say to me, I will do. And she went down to the threshing floor, and she did all that her mother-in-law had charged her. And Boaz ate and drank, and his heart was merry. And he went to lie at the edge of the stack, and she came softly and uncovered his feet and lay down.
Verse 8, Jeff.
Yeah, sorry, you moved it and I lost it. And it came to pass at midnight, and the man quaked and was taken around, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet. And he said, who are you? And she said, I am Ruth, your handmaid, and you shall spread your skirt over your handmaid, for you are a near kinsman. And he said, may you be blessed of the Lord, my daughter. Your latest act of kindness is greater than the first, not to follow the young men, whether poor or rich. And now, my daughter, do not fear. All that you say I will do for you, for the entire gate of my people know that you are a valiant woman. And now, indeed, I am a near kinsman, but there is a kinsman closer than I. Stay over tonight, and it will come to pass in the morning that if he redeem you, well, let him redeem you. But if he does not wish to redeem you, I will redeem you, as the Lord lives. Lie down until morning. And she lay at his feet until morning, and she rose before one could recognize his fellow, for he said, let it not be known that the woman came to the threshing floor.
Okay, so there's the story of Boaz. Very various different interpretations of what actually went on or didn't go on, but the simple pshat is that Boaz did not succumb to the seduction of Ruth in the same way as Yosef and Potiphera. So that is the second story. Now, Palti, the third one we know about. We've already talked about him. He had the sword in his bed and didn't succumb to Michal. So that's obviously why the Gemara is comparing Yosef, Boaz, and Palti. Let's go back to the Gemara. The Gemara says, the power of Joseph is the humility of Boaz. And what that means is that what Boaz did was far greater than what Joseph did. It's a league table of virtue, if you like. Bottom of the league table is Joseph. Middle of the league table is Boaz. And top of the league table is Palti. They're comparing the three episodes, one with the other, and they're saying that Yosef, what he did was good, great, but it was nothing compared to what Boaz did, and what Boaz did was nothing compared to what Palti did. Okay, And what do we call Yosef? What name do we give to Yosef? We've got Moshe Rabbeinu, Avram Avinu,
Tzaddik.
Yosef a Tzaddik. Why is he called a Tzaddik?
Because of this.
Because of this. Correct. Because of this. So if Yosef is a Tzaddik, what's Boaz?
A Greuser Tzaddik.
A Greuser Tzaddik. And what's Palti?
Super tzaddik.
Uber.
An Uber Greuser Tzaddik. Right? That's exactly what the Gemarah is saying. That is what the Gemarah is saying. The Gemarah,
Is it saying it in that many words, or is that an interpretation?
No, that's exactly what the Gemarah is saying. I'm going to explain it to you in a minute. It's exactly what the Gemarah is saying. The Gemarah is saying Yosef's a tzaddik, but it's nothing towards Boaz. Boaz is a Greuser tzaddik, and that is nothing to what? Palti, because he's an even bigger tzaddik. Now, why is that? Let's see if we can work out for ourselves without going to the Gemarah why they put them in that order. Why is Boaz a bigger tzaddik than Yosef, and why is Palti a bigger tzaddik than Boaz? Let's start with Boaz. Why is Boaz a bigger tzaddik than Yosef?
Because she was already there.
With the girl,
One at a time. I didn't hear you there. Start with Johnny and then Julia.
he actually got closer with the girl than Yosef got with Potiphar.
Okay, all right, that's one thing. That's fair enough. Julia?
Mine was the same point, really, that Ruth was there and present in the bed with him. So, whereas Potiphar's wife never got him into Joseph into bed.
Okay, good. Avril?
My point was that potentially he could be the husband. So there was some sort of right there, even though it was a bit premature, but he could have had the right to be her husband.
That's what the Gemarah says. The Gemarah says, more or less, that's what the Gemarah says. The Gemarah says Potiphar was what?
Oh, she was married already.
A married woman.
Yeah.
A married woman. And therefore, it shouldn't even enter Yosef's mind. She's a married woman, right? Whereas Ruth was what?
Single. Oh, no, she was a widow. She was
a widow. And Boaz was not
married.
Not a Kohen Gadol. So therefore, Ruth was effectively permitted to Boaz. Okay? So that makes Boaz a greater tzaddik than Yosef, because he was permitted, or Ruth was permitted to him. And so therefore it took greater willpower to not take advantage, if you like, of Ruth. Yes, Jeffrey?
But it killed him, didn't it?
Well, later on it did, yes. But
he never enjoyed the fruits.
We're coming to that in a moment in the Gemarah, probably.
Why do you say it was permitted, Johnny? I don't understand that.
And Potiphar was never permitted to Joseph.
Yes, I know.
But Ruth was a single girl. She was a widow. He could have married her there and then. He could have said, okay.
He could have married her, yeah.
Yeah. So he could have married her via intercourse. That's one of the ways you can marry.
Oh.
So he could have taken advantage, but he didn't. Now, that's why Boaz is greater than Yosef. What about Palti? Why is he greater than Boaz?
Because it was ongoing.
Because it was ongoing. Boaz had to restrain himself for one night. Palti had to restrain himself every night for an ongoing period, and that's why he stuck the sword in the bed. So in the league table of super tzaddikim for restraining yourself, then Palti is top of the pile. Okay, Palti is the uber tzaddik, Boaz is the greuser tzaddik, and Yosef is just a little tzaddik. Julia's shaking her head. She doesn't like it. Why don't you like it, Julia?
I don't like the fact at all that they should be considered a tzaddik for what they did. I would expect a tzaddik to be a wise man, not somebody who has managed to control their urges.
Well, that's a fair question, because what does Pirkei Avot say about somebody who conquers their urges. What does it call him? It doesn't call him a tzaddik. Ezahu Gibor Hakovesh et Yitzro. Who is a Gibor? A Gibor is a strong person. Okay, not tzaddik. You're right, Julia. And I think the fact, and I know exactly why you were shaking your head, and I do have a lot of sympathy with that head shake, to be honest, because the reason you're shaking your head is they're saying that a tzaddik is somebody who has gone over and above what you would expect him to do. And we, as 21st century men and women, would not expect anybody to fall foul, certainly not Yosef, who's got a married woman there with him. What's the great tzaddik that was? Why such a big tzaddik? And not only that, Rashi says something really strange. What does Rashi say on that, David? On that whole episode? How did he manage to avoid succumbing to Potiphar,
He sees the image of his father.
Yeah.
That's right. He sees the image of his father, right? Well, if you were about to do something very naughty, right? You're about to go into McDonald's and order a cheeseburger, right? And you see your rabbi walking around the corner towards you. You're not going to go in, are you? What's the big tzaddik? That's why Julia's shaking her head.
He's got into McDonald's to use the toilet.
Maris Ayin, David. Maris Ayin.
No. This is you're right. This is a problem. Someone that really needs to go, and there's no public convenience, and he knows there's one in McDonald's. Is he allowed to go in there? And probably Marastein doesn't count, because if it's Rabbi Jonathan Lieberman that's going into McDonald's, one is certain that he'd only be going there to use the public convenience.
Well, thank you very much for that vote of confidence. But you see,
can I ask another question on Yosef?
Yes.
Is it permitted, or first of all, we're talking about time before Matan Torah. Is it permitted for a single Jewish man to have relations with an Eshet Ish who's either Jewish or, in Potiphar's wife's case, not Jewish? Okay.
So the question is a good question, because you have two parts to that question. An Eshes Ish, the wife of another man, is forbidden to a man, right? Reuven cannot have relations with the wife of Shimon. What if the wife of Shimon is not Jewish? And what if Shimon is not Jewish? Is she an Eshes Ish? Answer, yes, she's an Eshes Ish. What if Shimon is Jewish and the woman is not Jewish? Is she an Eshes Ish? No, because it's not a valid marriage. A marriage between a non-Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman is valid. A marriage between a Jewish man and a non-Jewish woman is not valid. So the question is a good question. So in any event, I'm going to rush this because I want to just finish this last bit of Gemarah on here. In any event, I have sympathy with Julia's head shake. But that is how he's described as Yosef a tzaddik for overcoming this, which does actually, just as an aside, does give us some indication as to the mindset of the rabbis in those days, that this was something, they basically couldn't control themselves, because if they could control themselves, it wouldn't be such a tzaddik if you did control yourself. So there's that aspect of it. Right. Now, let's have a look at the last bit of Gemarah. Are we still on the screen? Yes, we are. Now, let's go back to the pasuk in Boaz. We're over time, but I just want to finish this. And it says here, 1 second. Just want to find it. 49. Verse 8. There we go. There we go. Verse 8. Jeffrey, are you with us? Verse 8 on the screen, please.
And it came to pass at midnight, and the man quaked and was taken around, and behold, a woman was lying at his feet.
Okay, so there's a word in here which seems we need to explain. Vayilafet, translated here, and was taken around. Don't know what that means, but was taken around. And it was Vayhi b'chatzi halayla, it was at midnight, Vayecherad ha'ish, he trembled, same word as charedim, by the way, Vayilafet, and he was taken around, whatever that means. Gemarah does not say, translate it like that. This next bit, if you are under 18 years of age, please turn off immediately, because this is an X-rated piece of Gemarah. And the Gemarah says, quotes our pasuk, Vayhi b'chatzi halayla, and it was at midnight, Vayecharad ha'ish, and the man trembled, Vayilafet, and he uses this word, Vayilafet, he turned himself, says Steinsaltz. Says the Gemarah, my Vayilafet, what does it mean, Vayilafet? Amar Rav says, Na'asa b'saro, his flesh became lefatot, like the head of a turnip. Okay? Anybody ever cooked with turnips?
Yes.
Okay. What is a turnip? How does a turnip feel?
Hard.
Hard and not soft and squidgy. So Omar Rav says, Shena'aseh b'saro, his flesh became hard like a turnip. What flesh are we talking about? We're talking about his penis. Okay, so this is what the Gemarah is saying is Boaz became aroused, and despite that, he did not take advantage, as it were, of Ruth, and that was why he was a big tzaddik. Joseph, on the other hand, ran away before he got to the arousal stage, and therefore he's not considered such a great tzaddik as Boaz. So, an interesting Gemarah. We're out of time. I'll just summarize what we've done today. We spoke about why. First of all, the thing we did was we learned some grammar, the mapik hey, the possessive form. It's very important to pronounce that mapik hey. Palti was considered to be Michal's husband, not in a physical sense, but in a emotional sense. Bachurim is a place. The Gemarah homiletically expounds that to mean that they were like unmarried because they didn't have intercourse. And then we made a league table of tzidkus, a league table of righteousness for avoiding falling into a trap. And at the top of that league table is Palti, because he had an ongoing battle not to give in. Second was Boaz, who was aroused like the head of a turnip. And bottom of the pile was Yosef at Tzaddik, who only had to overcome Potiphar when she grabbed his garment. And that's the end of that.
We've lost you again.
So next week, let's just wait to back on track, and I'll tell you what we'll do next week. Please go. Any good yet? No?
Can't understand you, Johnny.
Okay, I'll wait a second. Any good? No good?
Yeah, better.
Right. So next week we're going to look at a very famous. I'm going to take it off the screen so you can't cheat. If you don't want to know what it is, don't read on. We're going to read next week a very, very famous piece of Tanakh, which the Gemarah is going to expound for you. So there you are for next week. You've got a little taster. We're going to talk about a very famous piece of Tanakh, which you will all be very familiar with. That will be next week's Gemarah Shir. Any questions on today's X-rated Shir? Yes, Michael.
Could you just note, as an aside, I sent you a very two brief questions on last week's. Could you just give me a brief answer when you next go online?
Yes, I will do that.
Thank you.
I thought you were saying, Johnny, very quickly, that maybe in surmise that the marriage to Dovin wasn't necessarily valid. There was an issue on that, and she could have maybe been married to Palti, and that's why it was an added dimension that he was framed.
That adds to it as well. Yes, because there was certainly some doubt about it. I mean, he was given by Shaul the king and said, "Here you are, you're married." So yeah,
there's some fascinating mepharshim on this that I saw, which would be more appropriate when you reach it in the Tanakh Shir in a few weeks' time.
Okay, well, you'll be with us there to tell us all about that, David. Please God.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you.
I'll see you later in McDonald's, Johnny.
Say that again.
I'll see you later in McDonald's.
Yes. Okay, I'll go to the loo first.
Yeah.